You're listening to The Resilient Animal. I'm Annie Peterson, Doctor of Education with a Master's in Mental Health Recovery and Trauma-Informed Care. This podcast is an exploration of how helping other living beings can benefit mental health and what makes us all resilient animals. Hello, everybody. This is Annie from The Resilient Animal, and today we have the phenomenal Michelle Meschko with us. And Michelle, can you go ahead and tell us what the name of your organization is?
Hi, Annie. My organization is Small Breed Rescue of Southern California.
Okay, thank you. And just so for those of you who are listening, I've done the longest Animal Bond Academy episode with Michelle, and you can catch it on YouTube. And I think I had to take your introduction. I think we had to do 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 takes because I kept messing up the name. So thank you, Michelle, for giving us the
Absolutely.
name.
Absolutely.
So Michelle, I want you to start by talking about your background and how you got to where you are. However, I just learned a few moments ago about some husky puppies that you have. And I was hoping you could just talk to us a little bit about them, and then we'll talk about your background.
So our organization is starting to become notorious for breaking the rules. And generally speaking, we bring in small breed dogs, 10 pounds or under, that are struggling behaviorally in a shelter system. But there are occasions where we get some outreach and we realize that we're kind of the last resort. One of our reptile fosters ended up, long story cut short, with a mom and 5 puppies that came off a property that was technically abandoned being sold. And so her heart is as big as ours. So we decided, when she reached out to ask what does she do, to actually step up and bring these animals into care. Luckily, one of the puppies, the only male, was adopted by the original finder's daughter, but we then brought in 4 female puppy husky mixes and the mom. The finder took care of the medical for mom, but we had to then step up and take care of the medical for the 4 remaining female pups. When animals are born in the wild, so to speak, we are then dealing with contracted diseases that a lot of our vaccines are already designed to prevent happening from the beginning. And we, unfortunately, due to not being vaccinated, being born in a non-hygienic situation, so to speak, and also genetics, we did end up in the emergency room for 2 days solid and lost one of those puppies. But the other 3 are big and healthy. They're 4 months old now, almost 5 months. They are around the 20-pound mark, which is obviously over our weight limit. They are healthy, they are spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and looking for their forever homes as we speak.
Okay. And I know you have special love for husky type dogs. So we'll get back to that in a minute. But one thing that I really love about the people I speak with for this podcast is that not only are you working with animals, but just the very interesting backgrounds people have and what leads them into working with animals and supporting them in animal welfare. And so I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about your background, where you got started with animal welfare. You have a very international background with animal welfare.
Sure. I actually started in the human medical field, so I had compassion and a drive to help people initially. I did end up moving to Australia, and that is where I've always had a love for animals. I was the kid that brought home every stray, mostly dogs, but when the neighbors cat had kittens, that's when we learned how allergic I was to cats. But animals have been a part of my life since before I was born, and that comes from my parents. They weren't as fanatical as I was, but we have had a dog in our life for the entirety of our lives. So when I went to Australia, I actually couldn't find work. So I started volunteering at the RSPCA Queensland. And then it just things roller coastered and fell into my lap, where I ended up working for a database system that was developed by that organization. They then went international and needed my American accent. So I ended up working with them in Australia, New Zealand, and then I had to move back to the US. So I managed the US office for that organization that crossed over into Canada. So in that journey, I ended up working in 4 different countries, and I was able to visit just under 200 shelters, boots on the ground. With every organization I went into, I just absorbed as much information as I could, because what I learned very quickly, it doesn't matter that you're in a different country. Just crossing jurisdictional lines means that every organization is going to work differently based on that community and the knowledge that they have, the education that they have in terms of animal welfare, and the funding that they have. So I would learn as much as I could, and I started cross referencing education and information in doing that. When I came to San Diego after being to several states in the US, I ended up working for one of the primary shelters here, managing that specific database for them solely. And that's where I did things like I took advantage of every program they had. I was behavior fostering for them. I went through positive reinforcement training. I went through Humane Law Enforcement Academy. Anything they had available that I could do, I did. And with that came working with rescues. And in the previous adventure, I had worked with rescues as well, but not as extensively. Later, I jumped to a software system that used facial recognition software to help reunite lost pets with their families. And I couldn't resist that. That was at the time breaking technology, and I had to be involved because my goal has always been, having been a child bringing strays home, is to reunite animals with their families. Having lost some of the pets that I had as a young adult, that really hit home for me. So I joined that team, and that's where I rounded out at 250 shelters that I had been working with and rescues. I also actually started volunteering with rescues, and with that, I learned that some of the education from the sheltering side and the rescue side, they do not cross, and they really needed to. That was the catalyst that started us on this path of doing our own rescue, so that we could take the information that I had learned from the 2 different entities that work together, but they're not the same, and merge them and help to try to expand all of that to all of the organizations that we actually work hand in hand with.
Okay, let's take a step back. Why did they need your American accent when you were working for that other organization?
Like in the US, in Australia, every different section has a slightly different accent. And what we learned quickly is that the brainiacs, so to speak, behind this technology, they spoke in a way that most Americans couldn't keep up with. They either couldn't understand the accent, or they couldn't understand the terminology or the slang. And because I had been in Australia for 3 years, I had picked up on that. My mother is British, so I already had some of that experience of kind of translating. And because we went from Australia and New Zealand and broke into the American Canadian market, they really needed somebody who spoke their accent on the DVDs and the demos and things of that, so that it was easier for them to feel comfortable to buy into it, if that makes any sense. A lot of it also had to do with technical translations. The word behavior, for example, is spelled differently in
Right.
Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK than it is
Mm-hmm.
here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that the technology could be the best of the best, but if there's one spelling error or something that we perceive as a spelling error, that's going to change the perception of that technology. So I was there to really make sure that it was clean on the for the audience that was receiving it.
How we met, I was working for an organization and you came in and started to do some training with us. And I thought you were totally rad when I first met you and was just really impressed with both what you knew about animals and the technology. My background's education, and the fact that you were able, which was necessary, but you were able to train all of us non-techie people on the software, and it was understandable, was pretty amazing. Thank you for that. You were an amazing educator for that. So as an amazing educator, you started working with animals and educating more directly with animals and educating people on working with them. So, yeah, could you just tell us a little bit more about why you decided to focus on smaller animals and the ones that were a little more challenging?
Sure. When I was working at the shelter here in San Diego, one of the things that I attracted to, out of many, were the smaller breed dogs that were misunderstood in the sheltering system. Most of my pets growing up were small. I had a dog that lived to be 18, and so she was small, and she got me through the majority of the challenges of childhood and my my teenage years, but I also learned very quickly to learn things from her perspective. So for whatever reason, I have a miniature problem. The smaller they are, the more attracted I am. And usually they either have really big bad attitudes because they think they are the big dog, or they have big bad attitudes because they think they're going to be targeted or are working out of fear. In many sheltering systems across many countries, these animals with this behavior type do not necessarily make it through. It all depends on the economy, it depends on the money that the organization can bring in, and it depends on community support on if they can keep an animal like that long enough to work with them to understand that they can trust the environment that they are in and that it's a safe place, and to really shine and be who they truly are. So what I started to do is I started fostering those types of dogs under a certain size limit with that shelter. And there are some that they're going to trust me, they're going to trust my partner, but anything beyond that, they can't get the coping mechanisms in place to trust anybody beyond that. So a lot of those stayed with us and are still with us today. But the goal was to help them to learn new tools to deal with different situations in a way where they could tolerate the situation and still move forward in a positive way. So and in doing that's where positive reinforcement training came in for me, behaviorist training came in for me, and then also taking all of the skills I learned when I worked in the medical field and how to translate that to whatever audience was in front of me. I'm a technical trainer by trade, a certified technical trainer by trade. So I had to learn how to teach technology to anyone that was age 18 to 82 in the medical field so that they could come on board and be a part of that medical team. So that has applied to everything I have done ever since then. It's been the most valuable training that I have ever been afforded. And for that, I will always be grateful.
Yeah, that is very valuable. So, yeah, so you started your organization with your partner, Mike, and just tell us about how it's grown and what your experiences have been with bringing dogs into your environment.
Our grand plan, having learned from many other rescues, was to be foster based. Who could resist working with problematic, bitey little Chihuahua type terrier dogs, right? I mean,
Right.
they were going to flock to our doors. Um, so what we decided to do is branch this out. So I had been volunteering with another organization, and what I learned very quickly is while they were technically breed specific, and I say technically because we all end up breaking the rules because our hearts are so big we can't say no when we should. But technically speaking, they were breed specific, but they were also limited with their skill sets. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Every rescue has its place and serves its purpose to help animals get from one point to forever home. But that meant that a lot of rescues had to turn away from the specific animal behaviors that we were looking to help. So, under socialized, small, little, fearful, shy, bitey things, I found are generally overlooked. And so we set off to say, okay, if the animals that I know I can help best are the ones that where I'm volunteering, they absolutely say no to 100%, then I need to find a way to do it differently because this is my calling. And so Mike and I, we did all the research. We talked to everybody who has launched their own rescue or 501c3 in the past. And I sometimes question why we did it, but we did it. And we got everything ready to rock and roll. We submitted the paperwork in September of 2019. So technically that's your launch date, even though we had not been approved to be a 501c3 just yet. And as everyone knows, that is the beginning of our entire world shifting because the pandemic was coming.
Mm.
We had Being foster based means you have limited resources already because you do not have a brick and mortar except for your home. And we had already planned to use all of the technology that I had researched to be paperless, to be contactless, to be as technology based as possible. That is another thing that a lot of rescues up until that point had struggled with, and they were still using Excel or they were still using some one off database or something where only one person had control. So we had already planned it out how we were going to do it. And we were lucky we did it that way because that is exactly what we had to do in order to survive through COVID-19 and 2020. What was difficult was getting everybody else that was trying to adopt from us or work with us or foster from us or volunteer with us on board with that, which is where my training skill sets came into play to really talk to the person in front of me in the way that they would understand that this is the path we have to go down. And in the long run, with what's happening in the world, regardless of what your belief system is, this is going to benefit you across the board. And it did. So I was not just educating people in terms of the type of animals they were interested in adopting, but also in technology and the way of the world and how it shifted so hard that way.
Yeah, it's tricky to, and that's why I said before you're such a great educator, because people who are technology resistant or had already decided, oh, I'm too old, I can't, figure it out, I can't learn this stuff. You were able to get them online, and that's how you did many of your home visits too. And I don't know, I've so those of you who have listened to previous episodes, I've mentioned Michelle without mentioning Michelle and how wonderful her application processes and home visit processes. It's detailed, it's organized, it's comprehensive. You do want to make it easy for the people who are adopting, but ultimately is this the right environment for the animal? I would love for you to talk about the application process and how you did home visits during, I'm doing air quotes, home visits during COVID.
I do have to give some credit to my parents. My father is military and was almost going into space. And so he's very type A personality. And I learned from him in how to manage my time and get everything in, and when it's appropriate to be funny and relaxed, and when you need to really be serious and clearly communicate what you're trying to get across. On my mother's side, my mother knew technology was coming before anybody else did, and she has always been in the forefront of that. Not something that that it was just something she knew. So in my teenage years, she had me, before I got my real job, she taught me how to dress for an office job. She had me come in and file their paperwork and everything, and I had to do it all for free because I had to learn the way of the world and what was coming, and she was right.
Good old parents for
So I,
teaching us those hard lessons.
and my mother was also British, who had come to America, and so she knew the way of, she had worked for the airlines and everything. So she was very worldly, and my father as well, being in the military. So I learned a lot of, we have to be able to communicate across the board with a lot of different entities, even if we don't want to. So what we did, our process, we actually work with two very different types of animals. We do, as we've discussed, deal with the small breed dogs that are not sheltering well, for lack of a more detailed term. We also deal with reptiles that end up in the sheltering system that are either misunderstood, the sheltering system doesn't have the capabilities to deal with that animal, or they're under socialized, and so they are very reactive. So our process is different for the two, but initially it starts with, you have to go in and find the animal that you're interested in and fill out an application for that animal. You cannot fill out a generic application that covers just whatever fits you, because we need you to read what's going on with that particular animal, understand that animal, and decide if that's a good fit for you, not just looking at the cute and fluffy face, right? Once that happens, we have you schedule an interview. Our application is only about 10 questions. And we do that because I know if you pass those 10 questions and schedule an interview with me, I'm going to learn way more about you and who you are and where you are in life and what your intentions are and what your vision is by having a conversation with you on the phone than giving me 3 pages of question answering that can be interpreted any which way. So we do a 30-minute interview, and based on that information determines the path. Either this is not a good fit for you, and here is why. I and Mike, we do not believe in just cutting it off because our gut tells us to do that. We dig deep and find out why, because my goal is for that person to have learned something about something from that conversation. Either they're going to learn about the animals in which we actually deal with and think harder next time they apply for something, or they're going to learn something about themselves and what they will and will not tolerate for the next 10 to 80 years, depending on the animal that you're trying to adopt. Or they're going to just be really frustrated with us because we are dealing with technology and this is our path, and they hang up on us. And that's okay too, because that's just somebody that's not somebody that's in our wheelhouse to work with. And they made that choice, not us. But if we approve them and it is a dog, this is where we put the animal on hold and we have them schedule a time for us to come to them. Unfortunately, what this does is it limits the distance that you can be, because we then have to travel to you with the dog and everything that belongs to the dog, and be scheduled to spend time with you up to 2 hours to make sure this is not just a good fit for you, but a good fit for the dog. And a lot of times we've already weeded that out in the interview process because it's usually not a good fit for the dog based on their behavioral challenges and or needs. And sometimes we break the rules and it is medical. And sometimes they're perfectly great dogs. They just ended up with us somehow for whatever reason. But we do. So in other words, if you're 3 hours away, we cannot do this, because if this is a behaviorally challenged dog and it doesn't work for you, are you really going to make the 3 hour journey back to us and bring us the dog back if we don't have the resources to come get the dog from you? And the chances are is that's not going to happen. And our goal is to, if it doesn't work out, they come back to us. And we make that very clear. It's in the contract. And we want them to feel comfortable bringing the animal back to a place that the animal knows. And usually when we get to that point, they are already invested with their heart in this animal, knowing that they could still not be a good fit, especially if they have other animals in the home. Realistically, if we're doing a dog to dog, somebody in that pack may not work with this dog or vice versa. So really the animals are going to tell us if this is going to work. But we followed COVID guidelines. So to keep contact as minimal as possible, we brought all of their gear. Now, when you adopt from us, the adoption fee is not cheap for a reason, but they are spayed or neutered. They have their shots. All medical is taken care of. Dentals are taken care of, and they come with all their gear. So they come with a wire crate, and that is their bedroom. That is their safe space. It is not punishment. It is something that smells like where they just came from, because they also come with their bed, and they come with any clothing they have. They come with their collar, their leash, their harness, our tags. They are microchipped. There is a blanket that goes over there. So if they need to run and hide because they are uncomfortable because we are no longer there, that is their bedroom, so to speak, until it is no longer needed in that home, to which they can fold it up and slide it under their bed, because we did go through a pandemic and people became homeless and had to find shelter with their pets. And now you have that tool. We provide them with some of the food they're on, the treats, dental treats. We provide them with chew bones. We provide them with training tools. We also provide them with literally poop bags, anything they need, so that even though maybe they're not the prettiest, they have everything they need to get started. Because remember, they're dealing with a potentially shy, fearful dog. They may not be okay to go to a pet store to go get suited up with a new harness right away. So we want to make sure we have some goals. One, we try to avoid broken hearts if we can. We try not to judge people. So if they call us in 2 days and say it's just not working, that's okay. We're going to come and get the dog. It's fine. We're not going to judge them, because things happen, right? If in the middle of doing an adoption process, they have to back out, I'm fine with that, because for whatever reason, they have figured out that this is not something they can move forward with. And that's what we want before their kids get attached or their mother gets attached, and then they have to break away from the animal. We also believe that context is everything. So what they are conveying to us about what their property is, maybe when we get down there, it's not what they thought, and we can explain why this dog can get out here, or this is not safe here, and maybe that's why it doesn't work out. We have kind of our standard sayings that we share with people, because our true interest is to have a good fit for the lifetime of that animal, not just find a home because we're full. When it comes to our reptiles, it's a little bit different. We don't have to do an on-home inspection, but depending on the animal that you are wanting to adopt, we then put the animal on hold if you're approved, and then you are going to be directed to our resources page for that animal type, so that you can utilize our guide in order to assemble an appropriate enclosure for that animal in this environment. And I say that because we get a lot of, I've been watching YouTube, and, I've been reading people on Facebook groups that are national. And one thing you have to remember is an animal that is a desert animal has different requirements depending on where you live.
Mm.
We are here in San Diego, and it is slightly humid. We are in a desert, but it's not desert per se.
Mhm.
But Utah is different because whether you're in southern Utah or northern Utah, you're either dealing with extreme heat and dryness without any humidity, or you're dealing with
No,
temp. So
I know I was going to say you get heat or snow there.
yeah, exactly. And in Florida, your humidity is through the roof. So you
Oy.
have to figure out a way to control the humidity for, say, a bearded dragon in Florida. When we direct you to our resource guide, it is for that animal type in this Southern California climate. So it doesn't mean context is everything. It doesn't mean that what they're saying on YouTube or whatever you're watching is wrong, but you need to make sure you have an understanding of where they are reporting from.
Yeah, and I love how much time you spend with people. And one thing I have to say, and I still don't get why people don't adopt more. Yeah, the adoption fee might be a little higher, but gosh, you named off so much stuff that animal has. And especially the medical. Medical is really expensive. And the fact that they are adopting this animal with all of these medicals taken care of already is just phenomenal. So thank you, Michelle, for doing all that. So I did want to talk about, you were mentioning reptiles. And you mentioned earlier too socialization. And yeah, people need to socialize their reptiles as well. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about the reptiles that you have in your care and just what that transition was all about?
Sure. Reptiles, they were supposed to be an on the side thing because Mike has extensive reptile experience. At one point, he did have rattlesnakes as pets until he realized his roommates were not mature enough to ensure that
Mm.
the enclosures were locked.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, can be a problem. So when you're dealing with reptiles, you are still very focused on behavior. Reptiles are exotic, they're intriguing. You either love them like you can't handle it, you love them so much, or you are terrified. And we have to respect both, but we also have to come and meet in the middle. So we have a lot of people, it's called a hobby when you get into the reptile world because a lot of people want a lot of different kinds of reptiles for various reasons, some good, some not so good, and mostly because they're really cool. But they don't necessarily always take the time to do the learning portion of what it takes to not just take care of that specific animal, but the longevity of their lifespan. How big are they going to get? What are their requirements being in captivity? And how do you socialize them? How do I understand how to read their body language? A snake is not just a snake. We have ball pythons. They are the couch potato of the snake world, in my opinion. They are also the most popular and easy animal to get a hold of. These are what people refer to as my first snake or the introduction to my kids for reptiles. Because they are nocturnal, you can take them out during the day and eventually they're going to fall asleep on you. So they're not squirming away. They're not high energy. They're not high metabolism. They are ambush predators, which means they sit and wait for their food to come to them. It also means they don't eat very often because their metabolisms are slow in the event that food doesn't come for a while. So you can watch a trilogy on Netflix and have your ball python, if they're big enough, on your shoulders literally the entire time sleeping at the
Oh,
same
I
time.
love ball pythons. That sounds really cute.
They are my favorite. They are my favorite because I can be doing dishes, I can be doing a podcast, I can, whatever I'm doing, they can be with me and I have that comfort. We have one gentleman who adopted from us. He never, ever thought he would even touch a snake, but he sees his snake, Sully, as that therapy animal. It's that
Mhm.
hug that he needs, that implicit trust of handling that animal and that it's not going to be harmed. What happens though is people get this animal at pet store or something marked down because it's been there too long, because they have all these protocols and it's pretty, and they take it home. What they don't realize is ball pythons can live anywhere between 25 and 40 years if you take really good care of it. Ball pythons require medical care if there are problems, and there are vets that can take care of them, but you're not looking at a cheap endeavor. The setup, your ball python was $50. Yeah, okay. But your setup can be anywhere between $600 and $1,000, depending on how grandiose you want to go. Your ball python requires humidity in order to be healthy. It needs to be on certain substrate, have certain, even though it's nocturnal, you have to provide UVB sunlight. And that's not through a window coming through from the front of the house. Our windows block UVB. So anybody who lets an animal free roam their house thinking they're getting what they need from the windowsill is not happening. So this $50 animal actually is a big deal. This animal also, depending on if they're male or female, will determine how long they get. They can get up to 5.5 feet, and how girthy they get. They can put your fingers together, your pointer fingers and your thumbs, and look at that circle. That's where they can get to. Okay. So you're looking at the longevity of that animal. And if you do it on a whim, you're adding to the problem, because then what happens when you learn about morphs? In the ball python world, you learn that you have yellow ones and white ones and orange ones and black ones and all these different colors that people have bred for. So now you don't want your common one that looks the same as they do in the wild. You want something cooler. So you can either add to your quote unquote collection, which by the way, we don't like that term, or you end up getting rid of your first one and getting your cool one. So this is where it all adds to the problem of having too many ball pythons. The other thing that happens is everybody realizes it's really easy to breed ball pythons. We do believe in breeding of certain types of reptiles, because if you don't start breeding them and having captive bred animals, you are still taking them from the wild. And that's where you get your $15 to $25 iguana or your $15 to $25 Chinese water dragon. And because they're wild caught, and they're probably not going to live past the age of 2, which is why so many people think they only get this big and live that long. But it's actually not the case. So your goal is to adopt or find one that is captive bred, but understand what you're taking on and be committed to that animal, not creating a collection, because that's how they end up in our care. And we are generally dealing with neglect, under socialization. We're dealing with medical problems, usually because people are still buying those rocks that you can put in, those heat rocks. You're dealing with belly burns on a lot of snakes. People keeping baby bearded dragons in the same enclosure because it's convenient for us. But then you have missing toes, missing tails, missing limbs, and you have behavior challenges. When a baby bearded dragon is born and hatches from its egg in the wild, they do not hang out like a family. They scatter because they're trying to stay alive. They scatter and they hide. When we are forcing them to stay in an enclosure that's too small, we're not feeding them enough, and we're hoping people buy them, it's a big problem. So we have bearded dragons, leopard geckos, crested geckos, ball pythons. We have corn snakes, king snakes. We have rosy boas that are not wild. We have had in the past turtles and tortoises, box turtles. We don't do water animals. We do not have the ability to do that. Your wild caught red-eared slider that was $15, that's about the size of a quarter if you get it from the flea market, is going to require a pond. literally, because they get so strong, they will break the glass of any tank you put them in your house. And they are very dirty animals. So
I've had them before. Yeah.
don't be sucked into their cuteness without
Yeah.
knowing what you're doing and planning and saving and building to do right by them. And then you're going to have this amazing relationship with your animal instead of it gets sick, I don't know what to do, I'm going to dump it. We have a lot of people that let those go in our local ponds, and that's illegal, but they can survive. Your box turtles, by the way, cannot survive in the wild here. We don't have any native box turtles here for a reason. So then we go through the breaking of the rules. We chose small breed rescue because it refers to a smaller set of animal types, not necessarily small breed dogs. So we've broken the rules. We also have tegus that are available for adoption. We have Nile monitors that are available for adoption. And we have 6 to 8 foot boas that are the sweetest animals available for adoption.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger the snake does not mean that they are the most scary. They are actually the most calm. When you have a small snake, it knows that predators want to come get it. So it is going to fight for its life. So getting a baby snake at home, one, they're so tiny, you may not be able to feed it properly. So you may lose it just from starvation. But two, you have to handle them every single day to get them used to
Mm-hmm.
being handled and socialized with you, not others. All reptiles, generally speaking, are singletons. They don't live
Mm-hmm.
with each other. I don't really care what anybody else says. If you want a happy, healthy animal, do not project your emotional needs as a human being onto them. They're different. That's why we love them. They're exotic and they're different. They don't
Mm-hmm.
need another buddy to be happy. But yeah, when they're bigger, they are more comfortable and confident because they have survived babyhood and they have survived being a juvenile and they weren't eaten. So generally speaking, your bigger boas, you do have to be able to read body language. We also have a reticulated python. Those can get beyond 20 feet. So please don't go get one of those. I know everybody loves big snakes, but unless you have 15 people in your family that can help you and want to work with that animal, it's not a good choice. But we broke the rules a couple times. Their body language, a reticulated's body language is very different than a very calm adult large boa. So you need to understand the body language of every animal you're working with too. A tegu, a female tegu in a very small confined space is very different than a male tegu and in open space. You need to know what you're getting into. We also have Chinese water dragons that we weren't going to do. Yep. Yep. They're available for adoption on our website right now. And we no longer, unfortunately, are able to take in iguanas. They are very hard to get adopted because you can buy one for $15 at a pet store.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have invested so much into those animals, and we want to make sure that you want this iguana, not just an iguana, this iguana. So our adoption fees reflect that you're committed to this iguana. So that's, and they take a lot of space. And no, it's not a good idea to allow them to free roam, though it looks cool on YouTube. These are the challenges when you're looking at reptiles. Dogs, there is a general consensus across all dog breeds. And then each individual has its own subset. Reptiles? Not every snake is the same, right? Not every lizard is the same. You're dealing with a lot of different variables. Even your tortoises are different in terms of their needs, their longevity, what they eat, how big they get. Red-footed tortoises, that's a tortoise, they eat meat, they eat protein. They're one of the very few. Generally speaking, tortoises are vegetarians. So you have to understand and know what you're getting into. And so that's where our interview conversation comes into play to make sure you know what you're getting into. And a lot of times, I'm not going to lie, in our reptile area, we have a lot of animals that stay here long term because I'm diligent in getting people to understand what that means. And either it's going to resonate and they're going to say, I'm ready to move forward. We had one young lady actually travel from Colorado to get the boa that stole her heart, literally. And with our reptiles, because we're only looking at the enclosure they put together, we can do that on Zoom. So it's different than dogs. If you're far away and you're willing to make the trip and travel with that animal back to where you live, we'll talk to you. Absolutely. If you're going to do right by that animal, absolutely. But you have to be willing to make the trip. But if we talk to you and you realize, oh, this is definitely not for me, I had no idea that's how long they were going to live or how big they were going to get, then we have done a really positive service to that person and the animal. But we also get some people that listen to us and they glean the information and then they go get it from a pet store. And there's nothing we can do about that. But the only thing we can do is hope they come back and they use our resources page, or they learned something, anything to help the animal that is going to be in their care be
Mm-hmm.
in better hands.
Have you ever completely maxed out on space for all animals? Yeah.
We are 1000% maxed out on space at this moment. In fact, the end of 2023 and all of 2024 has been the hardest for us because if we don't have to say no, we won't. And we have successfully had far more reptile fosters than dogs because people are like, oh, I didn't know I could foster. Every reptile that goes into foster, we give you the unique setup environment that you need. You just have to maintain it and commit to sharing on social media and spreading the word that these animals are available for adoption and showing up to our adoption meet and greets. Our adoption events are not adoption events in the traditional sense. You cannot walk in, put in an application, get approved, and walk out with an animal ever. You have to go through whatever process that we have set up in order to do that. So we call them meet and greets. So you come and you get to hang out with them and socialize, and you get to touch a snake for the first time because you've never trusted anybody to help you do that. And then we take tons of pictures and everything, and we're hoping that at that point somebody can spread the word to find somebody who wants to help us foster, because they can't make the long-term commitment and they also are trying to help save lives. Our fostering guidelines are pretty clear cut. You have to want to help find this animal a new home. And if that's your home and you want to adopt, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. We
Mm-hmm.
do foster to adopt for our reptiles, but there are guidelines around that, because otherwise, if that animal gets sick and they're still in our care, guess who has to come up with the vet bill?
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, we do have a lot of veterinarians that work very well with us. They are super generous with their services and their fees. We could not do this without our extended vet staff teams that see what we're trying to achieve and help us to do that. And that goes for our dog and reptile vets. Additionally, when you adopt a reptile, we provide all of those reptile vets to you. And as we move up California in terms of people adopting, they send us vets that they have discovered in their hometown that specialize in exotic and reptiles, so that we can include that on the list, so that wherever you are, there is a specialist you can find if you need it. Do everything we can to give as much tool, service, and support. And that includes going beyond, once you've adopted, if you have questions, concerns, or you don't feel like the information you're getting from whatever source you're going to is accurate, you have an open door to reach out to us and ask. And we will reach out to anybody on our team and our board that can help you in that specialty to guide you in the right path the best that we can. So just because you adopt, you're not adopted and gone. We also don't spam you or anything like that, but you can always come to us and ask if you have questions.
And I'm glad you brought up at the adoption events, it's not a hey, walk in, choose an animal, and leave event. There's the process. People still need to go through that process and meet an animal for the first time, or yeah, because so many of them are like that. Like the goal is to go home with fewer animals than you arrived with, but that's not necessarily great for the animal.
One of the things I just wanted to put out there, because some people will say, hey, I've seen them at expos. We do go to reptile expos. That's where the breeders go to sell their animals or their enclosures, their stock, whatever. And we're okay with that, especially if they're captive bred. What we have learned, we are building relationships with them because we have several organizations that we work with that are breeders that we support because they are helping to stop you from taking them out of the wild. They also have an innate knowledge of that animal because they've been with that animal since it came into the world. They may not be as diligent as we are in terms of the rehoming, but we have seen people at expos say, no, I don't truly believe you're going to take care of this animal. I've put everything into it. It's stunning. It's beautiful. I want it to live its long life. I'm not selling it to you. We go there, though, wearing our rescue shirts to advertise who we are, not to deter people from doing what they're doing, but to learn what are the trends happening now and what are we potentially going to see coming through our rescue. And I'm going to tell you, the last 4 that we've gone to has been loaded with ball pythons. Loaded. Like everybody was like, they're so easy to breed. I'm going to make a ton of money. When the market is saturated, you're really not. So there's that. But there are new things that are coming around. What we also find is that they are trying to help support us as well, in that they will give us discounts. So what we do tend to find is that people admire what we do and they appreciate that we are talking to breeders and we are learning from them and they are learning from us. And so when we need to buy supplies, like if we're buying bedding for snakes or things like that, they'll give us not just the expo discount, but they'll give us an extensive discount. One of the things that we are happy about in terms of what we do, we work really hard to create and maintain relationships with other organizations that have their own niche, right? So yes, they're breeders, but we can learn from each other and we can support each other. Yes, they're a shelter. Yes, they have euthanasia, but we can work with each other, right? And point out the positives of each other. We take animals from sheltering systems pretty much exclusively. We really don't do owner surrenders because it's just too much. And we want to get them out of shelters that don't know how to work with them because they're at their last stopping place. And if we can help with that, we take them out of the shelters. And that's all the way up the coast. Like when I say all the way up the coast, like Northern California has literally flown 2 Weeble Wobble puppies all the way down to us. And there's a volunteer plane system that happens where pilots will volunteer. I think it's, I can't remember their name. Oh, darn.
Yeah.
But they flew these puppies down to us because we were the only ones that would take a chance on them. And they got
Wow.
adopted by a veterinarian who specializes in that type of neurological issue. So, and we promote our shelters. We promote, because our shelters in San Diego are not the same as across the country or other countries. And I've been there. I know they are doing everything they can to get these animals home. This
Right.
country, and I'm sure others, are in a crisis right now. What we have found is it's not because people went back to work after adopting through the pandemic. It is because the economy has enabled landlords to push people out so they can get people in that pay higher rent. And what has happened there is that means that people who had a nice big property, they were paying rent, everything was great now, and they got dogs that were approved on that property that are 30 pounds or more, can no longer keep them because they've been pushed out. The only place they can afford is a very small apartment that either only allows 30 pounds or under or no animals. What do?
Yeah.
So they're in the
Mm-hmm.
shelters. You're not just seeing pit bulls and chihuahuas anymore. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
try to find a chihuahua right now that
Mm-hmm.
is in a shelter. They are all uh, bulldogs. They are huskies. They are
Mm-hmm.
German shepherds. And they are pit bulls. And there's your occasional small dog. But we're in a crisis right now. And our shelters here in this city are doing everything they can. They have had huskies in their care for going on 2.5, almost 3 years, because they are
Yeah.
so desperately trying to save them and get them into a home. So we promote other rescues. We promote other shelters. If we can't take in an animal, I'm not going to even joke about this. We are getting requests to take in hamsters, guinea
Mm,
pigs,
mm,
rabbits. But then we promote the shelters and we promote the other rescues in this area that they could reach out to, if not to have those animals taken in by them, but to gain resources on how they can maybe keep their animal. What can they learn from that rescue that can maybe help them find a home on their own
mm-hmm.
without putting the animal in jeopardy?
Can you please share with us your resources page where people can get additional information and then also how people can donate to your 501c3 as well?
Sure. Our website is smallbreedrescue.org. And when you go there, you can click on the Adopt tab to see of our animals that are available for adoption. And you can click on a button to pick the category, because we are fully aware that not all dog people like reptiles and not all reptiles people like dogs. So you can click, and it's only going to show a button if that's what we have available. So for example, we have had to scale back on our turtles and tortoises. So you're not going to see those buttons. But if we got one in that we have available for adoption, then you would see that button. Our resources tab is going to take you to a series of clickable links. Anything that has an asterisk next to it has been updated in 2024, but that does not mean that the other information is not useful. It's just the most up to date. If it is labeled Guide for Adoption, you can click on that, and it's also going to have a lot of links within it that then links to Amazon items. And through that link, Amazon then, because we are a 501c3, will donate 13% of that purchase back to us. Our ability to fundraise is very limited. We are a small and relatively new organization. Again, we launched at the end of 2019, so we're not even 5 years old yet. We're close. But there are a lot of donation organizations that say you have to have been in existence for at least 5 years in order to even apply or participate. There are other big entities that say, unless you do over 100, 150, or 200 adoptions a month, you cannot apply, which is very against everything we do, because what you cannot see on our website is all of the animals that we have in care that are undergoing behavior modification, or that are, and that can take months and sometimes years. We have medical cases, we have behavior modification cases, we have socialization cases, and we still have to pay for them and their care. But because we're not pushing out the adoptions at a huge pace, we are not eligible to receive any grant money. The other side of that is there are certain grants we will not apply to anyway, because they dictate the terms on how we can use that money. And it's usually pushing X number of adoptions out a month. And that is just not what we are here for. Yes, we want everybody in a home, but it's got to be the right home and they've got to be ready for it. And we don't want to give out an animal to a home where somebody could get injured. Don't want children who don't know how to read body language, and the dog doesn't know how to read a child's body language, to come into contact and potentially ruin their perception of animals for the rest of their life because of an incident that we could have avoided. So money is very scarce for us, and there is a donate button on our website as well where you can go in and donate. Our address, our PO box address is also there. We have services like Venmo and PayPal set up, but they still take money out for themselves. If you want to send us a check, we still take checks. We will always take
Right.
checks.
Right.
So you can
Yeah.
mail that to our PO box that is on our website as well. By the way, kudos to Mike. He has developed our entire database. The plan is to have this available to other rescues or organizations that would like to also implement this. So it is a front-facing website as well as a back-end, for lack of a better term that I can't think of right now, database,
Mm-hmm.
where all of your animal records. He just developed the feeding schedule system. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very intuitive. He is an extremely brilliant person when it comes to technology and associating the human animal bond need into the technological need of how can we service everyone with that. We are smallbreedrescue.org. That's where you can find the most of our information. We're also on, I think, almost every social media platform that you can think of. And when you go to our homepage, you can see them.
You've got some great social media, Michelle.
Thank you. We work really hard. I will just say, when we spoke last time, we did this before and we had to redo it because there were some technical issues and things like that. But I was on the verge of becoming very ill, and I was actually sick for 8 weeks. And I was going to the doctor. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
says go to the doctor, but when you get sick and you run an organization like this and you're pretty much the sole person, you can't stop because you're
Right.
sick. So Mike was there and Mike stood up and helped out the best he could. Currently, most of us have full-time jobs, but he had to step in at certain points. And like I said in the beginning, we thought we would have people flocking to help us, and we just don't.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would like to donate to us to help us out, please utilize the tools that we have in order to do that. If you are local, and by local, I do unfortunately at this point in time mean North County area or thereabouts in San Diego, and you would like to foster, please fill out our foster application. It's just as small as the adoption because we're going to get more information from speaking with you because we like that personal connection. If you have skills in social media and want to help with that, helping to get our photos updated on our platforms, we have all of our animals on our website, on Pet Finder, on Adopt a Pet, and on Rescue Me. I am the sole proprietor who manages the adoptions, the foster stuff, the policies and procedures. I manage everything that we have to be compliant with our board of directors. I am taking care of the majority of the animals in my home, unfortunately. So we are desperate to get more foster homes to get these animals out. We are at a point where we are not able to take in a single other animal. We generally bring in animals from our sheltering system and from pet stores who are trying to change the system from within and have a desperate plea for a specific animal that's not doing well in their care. We will take from there. But if we don't have more homes that open their doors, their hearts, and make the commitment to help get these animals placed as soon as possible instead of being in a foster home for 2 years, where we're reliable or we're responsible for medical and food and all of that, and we don't have commitments to be at our meet and greets in North County, we can't do any more than we're doing right now. We really would appreciate the help. And if you can only do it for a limited amount of time, that's fine. We'll take it. And if you
Right.
have ideas on how to do this better, more efficiently, so that we can grow and help save more lives, please share. Our email address is info@smallbreedrescue.org, and we will take any ideas, suggestions, or recommendations that you have. You don't have to be local to help with doing the interviews or doing the social media or anything like that. So if anybody is willing to give of some of their time to help with that as well, we would love to talk to you.
Okay, great. I'm going to have all of this information available in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Michelle. I love speaking with you. I love all of your information. And like I said, I am going to have all of this information in the show notes, as well as the link to Animal Bond Academy. So you can see Michelle and everything that she does. And just thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity, and we're honored to be a part of this venture that you're doing as well.